Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Neville and welcome to Selective Imagery. Hello and welcome to Thanks for the Memories, Part 9. This series is about sharing memories, many that we have put aside but get resurrected when we stumble across the old camera our mom or dad used to take pictures of us as a child. Maybe we inherited some of Grandpa's old gear that we just stumbled upon when cleaning out the attic. These old and sometimes not so old cameras I talk about hopefully stir up fond memories you have that you kind of locked away inside yourself for a while. My mom was the family photographer from the Kodak Brownie camera, an 8mm movie camera with the light bar that could seemingly scorch the earth, to the Kodak Pony 4 35mm viewfinder camera that she let me use when I was very young. The Polaroid land cameras, the Kodak Instamatics. My life was full of cameras and, of course, photographs. One of two songs that stuck in my head from my youth was Kodachrome by Simon and Garfunkel and Jim Croce's Photographs and Memories, where the first lines of his song are, "Photographs and memories, Christmas cards you sent to me, all that I have are these to remember you." Hopefully these vintage camera discussions/reviews help bring back some memories for you or stir your passion to acquire an old camera to step back a bit and be more selective with your photographic endeavors. Enjoy the video. Hello everyone, this is Jeff Neville for Selective Imagery and welcome to Thanks for the Memories Part 9. Today we're going to talk about the Minolta Maxxum 7, which was released in the year 2000. Now, Minolta cameras have always been, and to this day, they have a special place in my heart since I own an SRT 101 when I was very young. And it looks pretty much like this. This is an SRT 100, which my neighbor gave me, and I sent it out and had a CLA done on it, so it's in perfect working order. Eventually, I migrated. I had all different brands: Fujica, Olympus OM1s, so on and so forth. The list goes on. Eventually, got a Minolta XGM, which had aperture priority. And so that's pretty much what that camera, looks like. And I always wanted to have an XD11, which had, aperture priority and shutter priority. And I could never afford to get one. And when I look for ones that are on the used marketplace, for whatever reason, they decided to use a different type of material for the body covering, and that separates from the body over time. And so it's very, very, very hard to find one that doesn't have any separation. So that has kind of like prevented me from buying an XD11 because I just can't find one that has, survived the test of time in terms of the body covering, because it wasn't leatherette. It was like wasn't leather or leatherette. It was kind of like a padded vinyl. It was very thick and easy to separate over time. Now, Minolta was the first manufacturer to introduce a successful 35mm camera with autofocus lenses, at least one that was sold in quantity. And in the year 2000, that was near the end of the SLR reign. It came out, to me, with one of the best autofocus SLR cameras ever made, which is the Maxxum 7. also known as the Dynax 7 in Europe, and the Alpha 7, and it had the little squirrely Alpha, which obviously we associate now with Sony. So 24 years after its introduction, I finally get one for my camera collection, and believe it or not, this camera is considered very rare compared to the Dynax and Alpha models, which are basically the same camera other than labeling, but for whatever reason, the Maxxum 7 is a highly collectible camera and worth more money. And it came out, you know, only 2 years prior to the Nikon D100 digital camera, believe it or not. So if I'm going to just kind of like show you the camera here. I don't have a lens on it. So here's the front, and we'll go over the features. So here's the front view. Here's the bottom. Okay, I gotta get the camera strap out of the way. Here's the side. Here's the other side. Move this in. Okay. And of course, you got the top view. And the back view. Yeah, and you look at this camera and you're thinking, gee, are you sure that's not a digital SLR? Well, you know, eventually the Maxxum 7D came out, which was based on this model. It looks almost exactly like this model, and it was their digital SLR when it came out, and that came out in 2004. So, you know, what made this particular model special? I mean, this thing has so many features in it. I mean, it was at the top of the game. I mean, I'm telling you, comparing it to even Nikon bodies at the time or anybody else, this camera had features that no other camera had. It was truly an amazing camera, and still is. I mean, it autofocuses fast with the lenses, very bright viewfinder, very, very, very impressive camera. And it's, you know, it's some of it's metal, some of it's, you know, the high-end plastics that they use on camera bodies to this day. It has a wonderful grip, very ergonomic. Your fingers wrap right around it. Your finger rests perfectly on the shutter release button. I mean, it's very, very nice. So it's compact and it's light, and it has a built-in flash. Remember the days when some of the digital cameras had built-in flashes? And it wasn't that the flash was phenomenal. And to get this one, it doesn't have a button that pops it up. You just basically grab, there's like a couple nubs right here, one on each side. And you just grab it with your finger and lift it up. Okay. And there's your flash. Now, the flash range was at f4 for ISO 100, was 3.3 to 9.8 feet. And if you change your ISO to 400, you could go 3.3 to 19.7 feet. And that's, you know, kind of reminds you of the pop-up flashes that you might have had on some point-and-shoot cameras in the day. They had a range, depending on the camera, somewhere in that 15-foot to 19-foot range. But of course, the thing is with this pop-up flash, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, you can use it as in a wireless mode. You can use it to trigger other flashes. And that is what's nice about having a pop-up flash. Some people say, oh, a camera with a pop-up flash, that's a cheap camera, you know, you don't want one with a pop-up flash. But it's nice because it acts as a, like I said, it can fire other flashes remotely. It has a wireless mode. Okay, so it has a 9-point TTL phase detect autofocus system with 2 autofocus area modes, wide focus and local focus. And I'll show you where those switches are, but I think maybe what it's best to do And I'm going to have to look through my reference material as I talk. I don't have everything memorized, unfortunately. I'll just talk about what you see from the front first. Okay, so you're probably wondering, what are these shiny bars here on the vertical grip, or on the grip? Well, you have a function called iStart, and there's a switch on the back of the camera. You barely see it here, right above my finger. It turns iStart on and off, and what that does, if you have that enabled, when your camera senses your fingers on this grip, okay, you have these eye autofocus sensors underneath the eyepiece. So when you put your fingers on here, it automates that feature, that iStart feature, so that when you put the camera up to your eye, it right away starts focusing and metering quickly. It reacts quicker than a lot of other cameras because it has that iStart feature if you choose to use it. You have your autofocus illuminator up here. Okay. Now the autofocus illuminator, the range is 2.3 to 23 feet. That's pretty good. Okay, this button right here is your depth of field preview button. This is your lens release button. So this switch down here is your focus mode switch. Okay. You have letters S, A, C, and MF. Okay. So S is single autofocus. A is automatic. So that is, you always put it in A if you're using the program mode. There's two P program modes. One, I'll just show you quickly here if you can see it. You see the letter P in like green, and the letter with an outline around it, and then you see the letter P that's just white. Well, the one that's in green, that indicates fully automatic mode. Camera, it's like, consider it like a point and shoot camera. You put it in that mode, just pick the camera, put it up to your eye, just your focal range if you got to zoom, push the shutter release button, compose your picture, take the shot. Okay, but you have to have it in A mode down here for the focus mode switch. That's what is used when you're in that program, the P with the rectangle around it, outline around it. Then you have C for continuous, and then you have a manual focus mode. Okay, so that's pretty much all you have on the front. And I'll just tip it down a little bit where you do have a front dial and your shutter release. And when we show the back, you'll see the back dial. Okay. You have, we're going to look at the side here, and you're going to see your PC connection at the top for your flash, old style flash sync. You have a release button to pop the back off the camera. And then you're looking at this little rectangle and you're saying, what's that? Well, instead of having a plastic plug to cover up a connector, this has like a sliding panel. I take my fingernail and I move it, and that's my contacts for hooking up an external shutter release. And then I can slide it. It really, I wish they did that now on cameras. Have sliding panels to cover up some of this stuff. Now, the bottom of the camera, nothing overly exciting. You got your tripod socket. You have your battery cover, and you're wondering what this hockey stick is. Well, you slide it open, and it exposes the contacts for if you buy an optional battery grip. You have to slide that open before you put the battery grip on, and it makes contacts with electrical connectors on the inside. And when you don't have the battery grip, then you just close it. You close it shut, okay, like that. So that's what that's for. Look at the back of the camera. You're like, wow, that's pretty busy. Well, you have that eye start on or off. And over here, very hard to see. It shows like your film canister, and there's like a little button that you could push with like a toothpick or whatever. That's used to forcibly rewind your film if you need to do that. I mean, this camera will automatically rewind the film, and there's a lot of custom menus in this camera like you would have for a DSLR. And one of those features is you could have it so at the end of shooting, it rewinds the film all the way in, or you can have it so the leader is exposed a little bit. So if you're someone that does your own darkroom stuff, it's easier to get the film onto the reel if the leader is sticking out. You don't have to take the canister apart. So, you know, that's one of the features that you have. So let's see where we want to start. You have your on-off switch right here. And that's a very firm switch to turn it on or off. You're not going to accidentally bump it and turn this camera on. I mean, it has a lot of force for you to actually turn it on. Then you have this nice rubberized area when you put the camera up to your eye. You got your viewfinder. Okay, you have this LCD display. Okay, which is, I believe, it's 1 inch by 1.5 inch. It's actually called the navigation display, and you'll find out why in a little bit. You have 4 modes of what you could see on this display. I'm gonna turn the camera on. I don't have a flash on it, but I'll turn the camera on. And what I should do is put on, and I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to put a lens on this camera, small lens on this camera. Look a little better with a lens on it. So you have a display button. You have multiple display modes. And I'll tilt this so you can see some of it. I'll put and you have an illuminator. You can light up the panel, okay? So you have multiple display modes that show you, what functions you have active, and you can cycle through. You got a detailed display. You have a large icon display that doesn't show you as much information, but it's easier to read. You have a meter index display, so you can see where your exposure is. And then you have what they call a history display, which I don't think you can really read this too well. But anyway, you have 4 display modes, and you can illuminate the back panel. What else do you have on the back? You have a auto exposure lock button, like you'd have on a modern camera. It has a switch above it, and below you see 3 icons, and those are your focus modes. So you have three different, excuse me, your metering. Those are your metering modes. So you have 3 metering modes. You have spot metering, you have center weighted average metering, and then you have what they call the 14 segment honeycomb pattern metering, which is pretty much your standard metering mode. It would be, think of it like on an icon, your matrix metering. Okay, it's your go-to metering mode 99% of the time. So Minolta had this multi-segment honeycomb pattern metering in a lot of their high-end cameras, and it's really, really good. It's really, really good. So you rotate the switch on the top here, and to change those metering modes. So you also have a focus area selector, which is this switch right here that you can rotate, and you have 3 settings. You have what they call wide focus area, you have a lock mode, in the middle, and then you have what they call local focus area. So you have 9-point autofocus, which we talked about before, TTL, and when you're in the wide focus, it's using all those 9 autofocus points are active, concentrated around the center of the viewfinder. And if you switch it to local, then you can, use this outer ring and toggle through which autofocus point you want to use. If you only want to use one specific autofocus point, you would switch it to the local mode and assign which one that you want to use. And let's see, what else you got on the back? Obviously, you have this display panel, and let's talk about that a little bit. You have a door here that I'll flip down, and you can see how it's labeled. Okay, this is where you could go in and you can make adjustments such as your bracketing settings. By default, it's 3 shots, and you can change it to bracket 5 shots or whatever you want. You can change, okay, is it you shooting in 1-stop increments, half-stop increments, what have you. That's where you could change that information. And also, it's where when you first get the camera and you power it up, it's where you go in and you set the date and time and that type of thing. And also you have a button labeled custom. You have 35. I got them all listed here. 35 custom menu features, and I'm not going to go over all 35 because this video will be like 3 hours long, so we're not going to do that. So flip that up, and you have the the OK button in the middle, like you have. It's common on most cameras now. As you're going through the menu system, you hit OK, and that's pretty much it for the back. Now we're going to go to the side here, and what this is, you just take your thumb and you rotate this switch to different flash modes. Okay, so you have red eye reduction. Right now it's on front curtain sync, then you have rear curtain sync, and then you have a wireless mode where you can use the small pop-up flash. That's how you set it up to trigger other flash units. Another thing on the rear, you could kind of barely see it here. You do have a rear command dial. You had one on the front, you have a rear command dial, and you have a button here This button allows you to push it on the fly and go into manual focus mode. Go in and out of autofocus, switching between autofocus mode and manual focus mode at a push of a button. So let's look at the top. We're going to start over here, and you see a dial with numbers on it, and you see an indicator line, and that's your exposure compensation. So your exposure compensation, you have lettering in two colors. You have white and orange. Okay, I don't know if you can tell that on the screen. You have one side is white and one side is orange, okay? So the white side will go plus or minus 3 EV in half steps. And if you use the orange scale, that's plus or minus 2 EV in 1/3 EV steps. So that's kind of cool. So you have plus or minus 3 with the white in half steps, and you got the plus or minus 2 and 1/3 steps. That's kind of neat. Then it's going to be kind of hard to see here. See the numbers here underneath? Okay, it's underneath that same knob. That's your flash exposure compensation. There's a lever on the side. You can see me rotating it here. Okay, there's a lever on the side to adjust flash exposure compensation. And your flash exposure compensation is plus or minus 2 EV in half EV steps. So that's pretty cool. Then you have your hot shoe. And this is a special hot shoe, okay? It's kind of like, what Sony has now. They have like a more of an intelligent hot shoe. And this has more context than some do, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. And then you have all your modes. You have you have to hold the release button down in order to choose your modes. Okay, whether it's you have P, A, S, and M. And then you got program, aperture priority, shutter priority, manual, and then you have the green, the P in green with the outline in green, and that's for fully automatic mode. Now you also have three memory functions. Think of that like on a Nikon, some Nikon cameras that have like U1, U2, U3. So you have three memory functions that allow you to store a variety of camera settings and save them as a group. So that's pretty cool that you have that. You do have a small display window in here. The top, so that's the top display. That's the top display panel. It's very small. It could show you the shutter speed, the frame counter, your aperture, and it'll show you a film cartridge indicator with dash lines, and you can watch those lines, and it'll let you know that your film is advancing properly. Another thing that's kind of neat on this camera, and it has to do with one of the display modes, and this camera can store certain pieces of information about your settings and whatnot on up to 7 36 exposure rolls, and it can store that data in the camera, and you can review it, by changing your display mode. You can see some of that information. Looks like it's your shutter speed, your f-stop, your exposure compensation. So you have some information that you can store on all your shots. Like I said, up to 7 rolls of 36 exposure rolls of film. And then I know there's an add-on that you can get where you could store even more data if you want to. So on the top of the camera, you also have a drive mode selector switch. You can see the tab right here, okay, near the display panel. And I'm going to show you on the back. I'm going to flip it to the back. And hopefully you can see. You'd be looking over here. And let me try to you can see me changing it. So the modes that you can select on this is the first choice is what they call single frame advance bracketing. So it's taking, one shot at a time as you push the shutter button down, but it's going to bracket based on how you set up your bracketing mode, whether you're taking, the under, the recommended setting, and then the over, and whether it's, half stop differences, full stop differences, whatever you want, but it's by default set up for 3 shots, single shot, one at a time. Then you can also flip the switch so that it will do the bracketing in continuous mode. So it'll fire off 3 shots relatively quick. Then you have your normal single frame advance mode, which is no bracketing. Just you're doing portraits or whatever, 1 shot at a time, click, click, click. Then you have your continuous advance mode, no bracketing. Then you have a self-timer mode, and your autofocus illuminator will blink, and it'll get faster just before it's ready to take the shot. And you have a multiple exposure mode. Another thing that you can set up, from the back is that this camera can do date and time imprinting on your film, on your images. Okay, so that's another thing that this camera can do. You can imprint that on the lower left-hand corner of it'll show up on the lower left-hand corner of your print when you get your prints back. It'll have the date and the time imprinted on it. With the iStart autofocus, if you're wearing gloves, obviously, this sensor isn't going to work on the grip. So you can go into the custom menu features and you can set it so that as soon as you turn your camera on, the iStart functionality works. So when you put the eye up to your camera, the focus and the exposure systems get activated. Another feature, if you have, there's obviously different lenses that you could put on this camera. The one I have on here now is it's the AF zoom 24-105, f3.5, 4.5D. Letter D is important if you want the most functionality from the Minolta autofocus lens system, is you get the D series autofocus lenses. Because what's cool about that, if I put this to my eye and I zoom, get the focal length I want, and I want to check my depth of field, I go and I push the depth of field button with my finger, and what will happen is if you were looking at the rear of the display, it will tell you what your depth of field is based on your aperture that you're using. And, it's just going to come up with the range. So it's not like, okay, a typical, where it stops your lens down. So you're visually trying to see what the depth of field is, looking through your viewfinder. I mean, this will actually give you the numbers of the range of your depth of field. Wouldn't that be cool to have on a modern camera? Let's see. You have a 16-bit CPU, allows you to have some decent fast focus tracking. And it's funny, the rumors for the new Canon camera, the R1, talking about predictive autofocusing. SLRs had predictive autofocusing systems in them for way back when. I mean, it's just not a term that's used that often with modern day cameras anymore. But this Minolta had a predictive autofocusing system, so that if you were tracking and shooting a fast-moving subject, it would try to anticipate where the object was going to be to ensure that you had sharp focus. So the term predictive autofocus is not anything new. I mean, no one, depending on how old you are, you may not have heard that term before, but you're going to hear that term used for the Canon R1. Now, if you use a D-series lens and you use it with, happen to have one right here, I'm going to show you the back of it. This is the high-end flash from Minolta at the time. Okay. This is their 5600 HSD program flash. And if you had that flash and you had a D lens on here, it would actually use what they call advanced distance integration flash technology. So it was more accurate in determining your flash to subject distance and gave you better results than TTL. So that was something that was that you could benefit from, having the right flash with the right lens. Let's see if there's anything else I missed. Some of these, I said you have 35 custom features. Okay, when you flip down that panel on the back, you'll see one of the choices is the word custom. Okay, you hit that button and you rotate your front or rear dial. You can scroll through the 35 options of things that you can change. And some of them are, like I talked about, how it would rewind the film, full rewind versus leave you a little bit of the film sticking out, a leader sticking out. You could change your release priority, autofocus release priority, which you do on modern, cameras now. Your frame counter features, you can have it so your frame counts up, tells you what shot you're on, or you can have it count down. And years ago in the 60s, you had it got confusing. I have some cameras that are frame up counters, and I have some that are frame down counters. Count down. Okay, you tell it, and you set it's 36 exposures, and you take a picture, and it says, oh, you got 35 left, 34 left, 33 left. So if you can set it up either way you want, and you can configure what your front and rear dials do on the camera. And you have a feature that I guess was on a previous Minolta camera, or was something built into a lens, I'm not sure, but it was called an STF feature, what they call smooth trans focus control. Now, you have that feature in this camera, but the feature can work on every single lens. So you could go into, and what I did was, you could program custom menu 3 to this STF mode. And what that does, it will take multiple shots at different settings of an image to give you some interesting, extremely soft bokeh effects. But you have to have it on a tripod because, you know, you can't have any movement at all. But it kind of takes multiple shots of the same image and it kind of blends them, and it gives you a special bokeh, which, you know, it's not, I guess, not quite as good as what they call an STF lens itself, but it's pretty darn good. So it's interesting that they put that kind of a feature into the camera. Shutter speed range on this camera is 30 seconds to 1/8,000th of a second, plus bulb. Has a 1/200th of a second flash sync speed. It has high speed sync capability up to 1/8,000th of a second. When I said the camera can store, the camera can store 11 items of data on every shot. Okay, I only rattled off a few that I saw when I looked at the back, but you could scroll down, you probably get more information on what I saw. But there's 11 different items of data on every shot that can be stored onto up to 7 rolls of 36 exposure film. And the built-in flash can work in conjunction wirelessly with another flash. The on-camera flash can be set to provide 1/3 of your flash power, and then your other flash, which is off-camera, can give you the remaining power, remaining 2/3. Camera shoots 4 frames per second max, 3.7 frames per second in continuous autofocus mode. You do have a silent film rewind capability, which is quieter when it rewinds. And I already showed you the little remote where you hook up your remote and your PC. Okay. Sync. And you also have, which I forgot, it's going to be very hard for you to see it, just like on a lot of cameras nowadays. Let's see if I can find it. Over here. Yeah, you probably can't see it. There's a little dial here for adjusting your diopter. Okay, for those of you that wear glasses. So you do have a diopter adjustment as well. So when I bought this particular camera, I got it with 2 lenses. Like I said, this one's the 24-105. So that's a good range to have. And then I also got this lens. This lens is the 17-35 f2.8 to f4 D series lens as well. So these lenses are, you know, Minolta made their own glass. Okay, they made their own lenses. So yes, Nikon's a lens has always started off as a lens company. But Minolta did not make shabby lenses in any sense of the word. They had great optics and you know, wonderful cameras overall. Figure you might want to hear it. Yeah, some of us still like the slapping sound that you get from an old camera. Bird photographers are like, oh, you'll scare off all the birds. Oh, I used a D850 for many years for my bird photography, and I don't think I frightened off any birds with the slap of my shutter. But for those that had gotten into mirrorless prior to me, would always kind of give you a dirty look because, you didn't have the latest and greatest like they did. And they would look at you like, you're wrecking my shot because, you're making a lot of noise with your camera. But yeah, if you want a really, really fantastic film camera that has autofocus lenses, that you could still get the lenses, don't rule out the Minolta. And I'll just say, overall, we'll do one of these. It meets my expectations. Goes beyond my expectations of what I thought this camera could do until I did research on it. So, hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for watching my channel. I really appreciate it. Please give me a like and leave a comment, pro or con. Just please be respectful. And if you really enjoyed it, please subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it. And remember my motto: enjoy life, capture some of it, get out there and get some of your best images, irregardless of the genre that you choose to shoot. Take care and God bless.